Okay guys, today we're going to be practicing our area word problems. You have successfully shown that you can multiply mixed numbers together, which is the first step in being able to solve area word problems. But now we need to do a little more practice on applying that knowledge and using it to help us solve specifically area problems, because often when we're dealing with mixed numbers, they give us a context of an area. For example, if we had a room that was 12 and a half feet long by, let's make it a really skinny room, and say 3 2/5 feet wide, and they want to know what the area is. What is the area? We're going to have to use our multiplying of fraction knowledge to find our area, because we know that area equals length times width. So to find the area of this room, we are going to do 12 and a half times 3 2/5. Now with our improper fraction area knowledge, we can turn this equation into 25 halves times 17 fifths, which then we can multiply across. Now you might see that you can simplify right here, that a 5 goes into a 25, or you might just choose to multiply straight across, whatever works for you. I know right away that 2 times 5 is 10, and 25 times 17 is not something I can do in my head, so I'm going to have to do it longhand, which is perfectly acceptable. So 5 times 7 is 35. 2 times 7 is 14, plus 3 is 17, 5 and 2. So our numerator should be 425. Now I end up with this division expression, 425 tenths, which equals 425 divided by 10. 10 goes into 42 4 times, which is 40. 42 minus 40 is 2. Bring down the 5. 10 goes into 25 2 times, and we get 5 as a remainder. Now you can keep dividing with decimals because it looks like it might go in even, or you can leave it here and say the answer is 42 5 tenths, which really equals 42 1/2. And because we're talking about area and they give us the units of feet and feet, our answer is feet squared, or square feet. Remember that this 2 comes from the fact that there are 2 feet here. We're multiplying 2 feet together to get feet squared. So the area of a room that is 12 and a half feet long by 3 2 feet wide is 42 1/2 feet squared. Now, sometimes you're going to get problems that aren't as simple as finding the area with 2 perfect mixed expressions here. You're going to have to be able to use your multiplication strategies for doing mixed numbers and use them in another format. For example, the one that comes to mind is on our test where we had to do the equation where we multiplied a fraction times a dollar amount. So let's think about that scenario where specifically our scenario was that Mrs. L wants to make a garden, and she is selling, or she wants to buy soil for the garden. It's sold by the square foot. Each square foot costs 75 cents. So we're going to write that down. Each square foot equals 75 cents. And the area of Mrs. L's garden is 132 3/5 square feet. And the question is, how much will it cost to fill this garden with soil? So when they give us the area here, that means that it's really, if we think about it, there is 132 3/5 little squares. And each one of these little squares is 75 cents. So instead of drawing 132 little squares and adding up 75 cents that many times, we're going to use multiplication. And our expression can be 132 3/5, because that's the area, times the amount of money it costs. So 132 3/5 times 75 cents. When we get here, we have to stop and think for a minute, because we've learned previously that you cannot multiply a fraction times a decimal. You either have to have them both be decimals or both be fractions. Looking at these, I know I can turn this decimal into a fraction. It would be 75 hundredths, but to multiply two fractions together with a mixed number, I'd have to do the whole improper fraction thing, and this, as an improper fraction, is going to give me a huge number, because 5 times 132 plus 3 is going to be very large. It's going to be in the 600s. So instead, I think I'm going to turn this into a decimal. And I can do that by turning my 3/5 into tenths. So 132 and 3/5, I want to turn into 132 and something tenths, because remember that tenths is my decimal number. 5 times 2 equals 10, so 3 times 2 equals 6. So this is really 132 and 6/10, which I can write as 132.6 times 0.75. Now I just have a decimal times a decimal equation. 132.6 times, let's write it, 0.75. That zero is not really necessary, but I'll keep it in there for looks. And then I'm just going to multiply. 5 times 6 is 30. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 3 is 13. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 1 is 16. 6, add my placeholder 0. 7 times 6 is 42. 7 times 2 is 14, plus 4 is 18. 7 times 3 is 21. Plus 2 is 22. That's wrong. 7 times 1 is 7, plus 2 is 9. So when I add them together, I get 99,450. But remember, I have decimals to put in, so I'm going to count my decimal places. I have 1, 2, 3. So I end up with 1, 2, 3. 99.450. This 0 is superfluous. It is extra. We do not need it. So we end up with 99.45. And because we're talking about how much money, we can say that Mrs. L spent $945 on soil. Or it would cost Mrs. L $945 to buy her soil. So remember that you're converting a mixed number using our conversion factors and our patterns to figure out how to either make it into an improper fraction, which you could definitely have done, and you would have done your improper fraction times a 75 hundredths, or you can go the other way and go into decimals. For me, looking at this, it just seems more sense that it is a decimal answer here, because I know I can do decimal times decimal fairly straightforward. Sometimes you're going to get challenging word problems where just kind of like this one, where they're not just the basic finding the area. These ones you had to do find the amount of money that related to area. We've also talked about the finding the area of a shape. And I'm going to pull up that extra credit problem. We're just going to talk about it, where let's say this is our classroom wall, and I want to know how much, what's the area of the actual wall itself, or in our questions area, it was, what is the area of yellow paper Mrs. Fraser needed? Well, remember, to find the area of the yellow paper, you first need to find the area of the entire rectangle. So for easier numbers, let's pretend this was 20 and 10. I would find 20 times 10 to equal 200. And then I would find the area, that's the total area. I find the area of this door. Let's say this was like 1 and 3. Would be 1 times 3, which would be 3. And the windows, let's even say they are 2 by 2, just to make our lives easy. So 2 times 2 equals 4. So each of these equals 4. Once I know my total wall and I know the area of all my pieces that are not going to be covered by yellow paper, I'm just going to subtract. So it's going to be 200 minus 3 minus 4 minus 4. Or I could have added all those up together first and then subtracted them from 200. But remember that you find the area of your entire piece, then you find the areas of the part that are not going to be needed, and then we subtract. Hopefully you got a little practice here of determining word problems and how we use them with our area and with our mixed numbers. Basically, you just need to make sure that you're using your improper fraction skills and applying them to an area context, whether it be to find the area of a room or a concrete basketball court, or whether it be that you're using the area to find the answer of something else, like here when we found how much it would cost Mrs. L to plant a soil garden, or when you're trying to find the area of a specific area that is not covered, or the basil plant in the garden. Whatever it is, you can use your area knowledge and your mixed number multiplication knowledge to solve any kind of area problem or space problem or anything that involves mixed numbers, because we're using our multiplication of mixed number skills successfully.